Okay, so this is chapter 13 in the real world, covers media. It also covers leisure. We're not going to go over that section, so when you're reading the textbook, just know that that's not a portion of this that we're going to cover for this class. And then also keep in mind that a lot of the stuff in this lecture has nothing to do with your textbook and just fun things I want to show you. So yeah, you guys all watched the weird nerd medical version of me, and now you get to have the fun weird nerd pop culture version of me too. So let's go ahead and get started. So the study of media, it's a major social institution, and it is drastically increasing power and importance. And so this has been something that's been going on for a really long time, and I kind of laughed to myself in previous semesters. I was pretty good at saying things like it's this idea that it's the fourth branch of the government. It is now because, the commander-in-chief uses Twitter to talk to us. You know what? Let's not get sad. So we'll just recognize that it is very important. Another way in which it was the fourth branch of the government is, Bloomberg ran for Democratic president. He's definitely not a Democrat. And he's the owner of a media corporation, right? And so just know how important media is. And often when I teach pop culture, students tell me things like, the media doesn't really impact me. And I noticed some of y'all on the exams wrote about how media doesn't socialize you, but I promise you it does. And we're going to talk about how today. So just so you know the structure of media industries, there's a lot more of this in the slides that you have yourself, but I wanted to show you what happens when we have this major consolidation. So in 1983, you can see all the little dots over there. 90% of America's media was owned by 50 companies. That was a lot of companies, right? Now it's six companies, y'all, six. GE, News Corp, Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, and CBS. And you can see all the other subsidiaries underneath it. But News Corp and Disney and Viacom and Time Warner and CBS, those are all things that you're like, yeah, duh, those are media outlets. GE, you probably recognize mostly with light bulbs, but they own Comcast and NBC and Universal and so many other things. If you ever watched 30 Rock, they sort of make fun of that. So, even in the pop culture, they recognize how ridiculous it is. But yeah, these are major important things to consider, that basically 6 companies give you all of the media that you take in, and there might be problems with that. There might be some problems with that. There's another slide in terms of how we get actual news, right? Because media covers everything, but your news is also drastically impacted by the fact that only 6 companies run 90% of our media. This is just the concentration of media outlets, right? So Comcast in 2016, this comes directly out of your book. This is that GE Corp, right? $80.4 billion in revenues, right? And Viacom's the tiny one, but it's still $12.5 billion in revenues in 2016, and it's only getting bigger, right? And so the media and how impactful it is on our day-to-day lives is something to really take into consideration. Okay, so the structure of media industries. Do we have a monopoly in media? And this is when we would normally have a big discussion about whether or not we have monopoly in media. And this is when I'm just going to tell you, yeah, we do. The main issue that we have is internet providers and how few internet providers there are. And so, yeah, when you think about certain media outlets, you think, well, yeah, Disney and NBC and all of those things, but also don't forget about Netflix and Hulu and owned by Disney, and HBO and all these different streaming services that you can get. And while that's helpful, what I'm really wanting you to focus on here is the internet and how you access the internet, because the internet is how you get access to the media, right? Our parents, my parents, and some of your parents, and probably mostly grandparents, they all still have cable. Whereas all of us get our media through streaming services and the internet. And if there's only 2 options to access your internet, that's a monopoly, right? I ask the students who owns who owns your internet? And now that you're at home, think about who you're paying for internet for, and do you have other options? And then could you pay somebody else for it if your internet gets really bad or you don't like the customer service? And in most cases, no one else exists. You either have Time Warner or you have Comcast. And Comcast is one of the worst rated Better Business Bureau companies out there, because they just find sneaky ways to continue to keep charging you for things that they weren't charging you for before. And so, they're just an overall terrible company, but we have a monopoly here. Just think about all the different cell phone companies that are out there and know that the vast majority of them are using 2 different companies' cell towers, right? Okay, so it is the FCC's job to restrict media outlet ownership, and have we been doing a good job there, Ajit Pai? I don't think we have. He's the current head of the FCC. He has pushed this removal of something called net neutrality. So net neutrality is the idea that your internet you pay money to your internet provider and you get access to the internet. That is net neutrality. The FCC and a bunch of the major media outlets like Comcast and Time Warner have been fighting so that it's not just you paying for access to the internet, but it's also all of the websites on the internet paying the internet provider money for you to also get access to that stuff. And so if you think about it, like, Facebook's not going to have a problem. Netflix probably isn't going to have a problem. But some of the smaller companies and smaller websites, they're not going to be able to afford it. And if they're not paying for it and you're paying for internet and the internet company is like squashing down the speed, or your ability to access those websites, are you going to use those websites? No. And so net neutrality is actually a great thing. You just got to pay attention because the FCC tries to sneak those things in every now and then to try and see if they can't get Congress to pass it, because of course Comcast and Time Warner are going to pay all of them a whole lot of money for their re-election campaign if they can continue to just make the insane amount of dollars that they make on the way in which non-net neutral internet's going to look. Okay, so now we're going to move into culture and media studies. Pop culture and high culture and low culture, these are all things here. Pop culture is just the cultural expression related to the masses, right? We'll talk about that one in just a second, but high culture is this cultural expression related to the elite. And so I have an example here for you. This is my beautiful art. We have my beautiful stick figure down here, right? High culture is usually up here, right? In the brain. Low culture is often down here, right? This is where we make jokes, poop jokes, fart jokes, sex jokes, anything along those lines. That's considered lowbrow culture, right? High culture, you need to use your brain. And so I always ask students in this moment, is Shakespeare high culture or low culture? And a lot of times they say, well, it's high culture because of iambic pentameter and the fact that you all were forced to watch it or listen to it or read it in school. And then I go, actually, if you pay attention to it, it's all about sex and ridiculous things. And it was considered low culture for a really long time, and then it moved up to high culture, and then it went back down, and it's ebbed and flowed. And then when it comes to pop culture, and this is where my excitement comes into play, and if you haven't noticed it through all of these other videos, I have, and I'll move for you so you can see it, the Lego Harry Potter castle back here. This is what got me through my dissertation. So I wrote my dissertation, and every time I had an exciting, achieving moment, a different portion of the castle got built. You gotta find whatever works for you in terms of mental health. I also have a bunch of Legos in my office, for those of you that have visited my office. And pop figurines and pop culture is a much easier way to explain a lot of this stuff than just trying to dig through social theory. So, functions of pop culture. This goes into that theory. We have some positives. It creates collective conscious, social cohesion, social solidarity. So if you've ever been at a concert before and the people at the concert are singing the song louder than the artist can sing it, and the artist often stops singing it and turns the microphone to the crowd, and you get that feeling on the inside, and you're like, man, this is awesome, and everybody's on the same beat, and everything is happening right. That's collective conscious and social cohesion, and it creates social solidarity, right? And that's a positive function of pop culture. Negative functions of pop culture. We get the word sport from the French desporter, and it literally translates to divert, amuse, please, and play. So what are you being diverted by paying attention to pop culture? What are you not noticing anymore because you're too involved in whatever celebrities are doing or that nonsense, right? Now, critical approach to pop culture. How is it used as social control, and how does it reproduce inequality, right? So retail therapy, we're all feeling terrible, and so some of you may have already spent a lot of money on Amazon trying to make yourself feel less terrible. Who is that benefiting? Oh, them, not you, because usually after about 15 minutes, the retail therapy stops working. Keeping up with the Joneses is this idea that you have to keep up with those elite. We can't keep up with them, and then of course the elite are the only ones that benefit. Cultural hegemony, this maintaining of the status quo. I skipped over Orson Welles because it's talked about in your textbook, so just read that. Cultural hegemony, right? Who is the one setting the norms and values of society? It's usually to benefit them, and this is really where we see that cultural hegemony come into play when it comes to pop culture. And then it very much reproduces inequalities. So we have a gendering of villains. Male villains are often people of color, and so what are we saying there? And female villains are often psychotic or mentally unstable, and so what are we saying about women, right? And then I have this point down here with Kenan Thompson and Saturday Night Live. For a while, Kenan said, you know what, no, I'm not dressing in drag anymore. You guys need to hire some black women who are funny because there's plenty of black women who are funny. And they did. So it took other people on the show to kind of get behind it, but they were able to do so. And then Rotten Tomatoes is super fun because God forbid a woman or a person of color start winning in any nerd culture, and then people get upset and go on the internet and tank the reviews. Yeah, trying to just reproduce social inequality. Okay, so the Bechdel test is a super fun test. It's two named female characters who have a conversation about something other than a man. If a movie can pass it, great. If not, it doesn't even pass the Bechdel test. This is satire. It doesn't mean that women are portrayed well. It just is these bare minimum two female characters with a name who have a conversation about something other than a man. So we're going to look and see what has passed. Oh, these are the top 10 films of all time based on IMDb ratings alone. 3 of them pass it, and almost all 3 of them pass on a technicality. Then we have the top 10 films of all time based on awards, popularity, and cinematic greatness in terms of writing and directing, whatever that means. Again, only 3, but we're doing a little better on the passing with a technicality. And then finally, we have this list, top 10 films that pass. I have seen almost all of these movies. I've also seen almost all of the ones on the previous list, but I will say a lot of these movies are very spoopy, and I don't watch spoopy movies. So a couple of these I have not seen. But man, Mad Max Fury Road is one of my all-time favorites. Okay, so the interactionist approach. Social networks create pop culture, and we're looking at the construction of pop culture here, right? So why are songs only a couple minutes long? Most of you in class will tell me attention span. No, the technology at the time could only have 3 minutes worth of song on it. And so that's been the norm ever since, until, Bohemian Rhapsody and Stairway to Heaven showed up. I want you to watch the 4 Chords video, click on it, enjoy it, have fun with it. It's very entertaining. The structures of storytelling often all follow the same structures, and most stories are going to follow the same arc. The same things with adventures and trilogies and sitcoms. It's a laugh track in the background. Almost all sitcoms are not filmed in front of a live studio audience, CBS. And when they're not filmed in front of a live studio audience, CBS, they're using the live studio audience laughter track from I Love Lucy. So it's just a fun fact for you. And then social construction and then the MPAA rating system. So the rating system is a load of hot garbage in the United States, and this is why. If women experience sexual pleasure, it gets an NC-17 rating. If men experience sexual pleasure, PG-13 to R. More than 3 pelvic thrusts, NC-17 rating. We don't give a shit about violence. I don't know if that tells you anything in this country in terms of violence versus our shaming around sex, but it is a major part of it. There's some examples down here if you want to watch This Film Is Not Yet Rated. Okay. So that's the end of that. We made it through. I'm shocked that, but that's all I really need you to know for the media chapter. Don't worry about any of the leisure stuff, and I will talk to y'all soon, hopefully.